The nurse noticed the surgical needle count was wrong during a routine operation in 1945. When she recounted, she discovered not one, but 17 needles were missing. Following the trail to the hospital basement, she uncovered a hidden room where thousands of immigrant women were being secretly sterilized without consent. What she found next would change American medical history forever. Dr. Richard Caldwell had been performing surgeries at Fairview Hospital for over 15 years. His hands were steady, his reputation impeccable. That particular Tuesday in April seemed no different from any other day. The appendectomy was proceeding normally, a simple procedure he had performed hundreds of times before. Nurse Eleanor Parker stood dutifully at his side, passing instruments, keeping track of supplies. As the operation concluded and Dr. Caldwell began closing the incision, Nurse Parker did what she always did. She counted the surgical needles. Her brow furrowed. She counted again, methodically checking each needle in the metal tray. The color drained from her face as she realized the count was wrong. Not just by one, but by 17 needles. 17 surgical needles had seemingly vanished into thin air during a routine appendectomy. "Doctor, the needle count is off," she announced, her voice steady despite her rising panic. Dr. Caldwell barely glanced up from his work. "That's impossible, Eleanor. Count them again," he muttered, continuing to close the patient's abdomen with practiced precision. She did as instructed, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched each needle. 17 missing, doctor, I'm certain." Dr. Caldwell finally looked up, irritation flickering across his features. What happened next would haunt Nurse Parker for the rest of her life. Instead of expressing concern or halting the procedure to locate the missing instruments, Dr. Caldwell smiled. It wasn't a reassuring smile. It was cold, calculated. "Finish recording the operation as normal, Nurse Parker. I'll handle the needle discrepancy." The way he said it, so dismissively, so confidently, sent chills down her spine. Missing surgical equipment was a serious matter. Needles left inside patients could cause infection, internal bleeding, even death. This cavalier attitude was not only unprofessional, it was dangerous. But Eleanor Parker wasn't just any nurse. Before joining Fairview Hospital, she had served as a combat nurse during the early years of World War II. She had treated soldiers with horrific injuries under enemy fire. She had stood her ground when commanders tried to dismiss her concerns about sanitation and infection control. She was not easily intimidated. That evening, after her shift ended, Eleanor did not go home. Instead, she made her way to the hospital records room. If needles had been going missing regularly, there would be documentation, discrepancy reports, inventory adjustments, something to explain what was happening. What she discovered was far more disturbing than she could have imagined. There were no reports of missing surgical equipment. Not a single one. In a hospital that performed dozens of surgeries daily, this was statistically impossible. Equipment gets dropped, miscounted, occasionally even left inside patients. These incidents should be documented. The complete absence of such reports suggested something sinister, a deliberate cover-up. Eleanor's search led her deeper into the hospital's filing system. In a locked cabinet that she accessed using the master key she'd been entrusted with as head surgical nurse, she found a separate set of patient records. These weren't kept with the regular medical files. They belonged exclusively to female patients, primarily immigrants from Eastern Europe, Mexico, and Asia. Many had undergone routine procedures, appendectomies, gallbladder removals, cesarean sections, but each file contained an additional notation, Procedure B completed. What was Procedure B? There was no such designation in any medical text Eleanor had ever studied. The records showed that Dr. Caldwell had personally attended nearly every operation where this mysterious procedure was performed. As Eleanor was replacing the files, the door to the records room opened. Standing there was Dr. Howard Mills, the hospital administrator. His face hardened when he saw the files in Eleanor's hands. "Nurse Parker, what are you doing with those confidential records?" His voice was ice cold. "I was investigating a discrepancy in the surgical needle count, sir," she replied, maintaining her composure despite her racing heart. Dr. Mills approached slowly, taking the files from her hands. "These are beyond your clearance level. I suggest you forget what you've seen here tonight. For your own good." The threat was unmistakable, but Eleanor Parker had not survived the battlefields of Europe by backing down from threats. "With all due respect, Dr. Mills, missing surgical equipment is a patient safety issue that concerns every member of the surgical team." Mills regarded her coldly. "Go home, Nurse Parker. Consider this your only warning." Eleanor left the records room, but she had no intention of going home or forgetting what she'd discovered. Instead, she made her way to the hospital basement, following her instincts. The basement housed the laundry, storage, and morgue, areas she rarely had reason to visit. But if surgical needles were disappearing somewhere in the hospital, they had to be going somewhere. The basement corridors were dimly lit and eerily quiet at this late hour. Eleanor moved cautiously, listening for any sound that might alert her to another person's presence. At the far end of the main corridor, past the morgue, she noticed something strange. A section of wall that looked newer than the surrounding structure. It had been painted recently, but the paint didn't quite match the rest of the hallway. Eleanor ran her fingers along the edge of the wall, feeling for any seam or opening. To her surprise, a section of the wall moved slightly under her touch. It was a door, camouflaged to blend with the surrounding wall. With trembling hands, she pushed against it. The door swung open silently, revealing a dark space beyond. Eleanor hesitated for only a moment before stepping through the doorway. The room beyond was pitch black. She fumbled for a light switch and found one just inside the door. When the lights flickered on, Eleanor gasped in horror, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Before her was a fully equipped surgical suite. Operating table, lights, instruments, all modern and apparently well used. But what made Eleanor's blood run cold were the walls. Covering every inch of available space were thousands of surgical needles, arranged in precise patterns. Some formed circular designs. Others spelled out words in languages Eleanor didn't recognize. The effect was both beautiful and horrifying, a macabre art installation created from instruments meant to heal. On a small desk in the corner sat a leather-bound journal. Eleanor approached it cautiously, as if it might bite. The journal bore no name on its cover, but when she opened it, she recognized Dr. Caldwell's handwriting immediately. What she read turned her stomach. The journal detailed Procedure B, involuntary sterilizations performed on immigrant women without their knowledge or consent. Dr. Caldwell had been systematically preventing these women from having children, all while they believed they were undergoing routine surgeries. The missing needles were kept as trophies, each one representing another woman who would never bear children. Eleanor was so engrossed in the horrifying journal that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching until it was too late. The door to the secret room closed with a soft click. She whirled around to find herself face to face with Dr. Caldwell himself. "I had a feeling you might find your way down here," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You always were too curious for your own good, Eleanor." "You've been sterilizing women without their consent," Eleanor said, her voice shaking with rage. "That's a violation of everything medicine stands for, everything we fought for in the war." Caldwell laughed. "What we fought for? My dear, what do you think the war is about? Purity, ensuring that only the right sort of people propagate. These women, these immigrants, they breed like rabbits. They dilute our society, our gene pool. That's Nazi ideology," Eleanor spat. "It's science," Caldwell countered, "and I'm not alone in this belief. Half the hospital board supports our work. We're creating a better America, one procedure at a time." Eleanor glanced around, desperately looking for a weapon, an escape route, anything. "This is murder," she said. "Don't be dramatic, Eleanor. No one dies. They simply don't reproduce. There's a difference." What happened next would become the stuff of hospital legend. Eleanor Parker, 5 feet 4 inches of righteous fury, lunged at Dr. Richard Caldwell with the journal clutched in her hand. Though he outweighed her by at least 70 pounds, she caught him off guard. The impact sent both of them crashing into the wall of needles. Hundreds of the sharp implements rained down on them, piercing skin and cloth alike. Caldwell howled in pain as needles embedded themselves in his face and neck. Eleanor didn't escape unscathed. Dozens of needles pierced her arms and back, but adrenaline kept her moving. She scrambled past the doctor, threw open the door, and ran down the corridor, trailing blood and needles. She didn't stop running until she reached the office of the hospital's chief of surgery, Dr. William Brandt. Bursting through his door, covered in blood and with needles still protruding from her arms, she must have looked like a woman possessed. Dr. Brandt dropped the file he was reading and stood up in alarm. "My God, Eleanor, what happened to you?" Between gasping breaths, Eleanor managed to explain what she had discovered. To her relief, Dr. Brandt didn't dismiss her claims or threaten her. Instead, he picked up his phone and called the police. What followed was one of the largest medical scandals in American history, though one that has been largely buried in the intervening decades. Police raided Fairview Hospital that very night. They discovered not only the secret surgical suite with its walls of needles, but also records indicating that over 3,000 women had been subjected to Procedure B over the course of 7 years. Dr. Caldwell was arrested, along with Dr. Mills and 5 other physicians who had participated in the sterilization program. But what should have been a clear-cut case of medical malpractice and assault took a disturbing turn when the case went to court. The defense didn't deny that the sterilizations had taken place. Instead, they argued that the procedures were perfectly legal under existing eugenic laws. And the most terrifying part? They were right. In 1927, the Supreme Court case Buck v. Bell had upheld the constitutionality of state laws, allowing for the forced sterilization of individuals deemed unfit to reproduce. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes had infamously declared, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough," effectively giving medical and governmental authorities the power to decide who could have children. By 1945, over 30 states had eugenic sterilization laws on the books. What Dr. Caldwell and his colleagues had done was technically legal, if morally reprehensible. They had simply expanded the definition of unfit to include immigrants and minorities they personally deemed undesirable. The case against the Fairview doctors collapsed. All 7 were released without charges. Dr. Caldwell even attempted to sue Eleanor Parker for assault, though the case was dismissed. Eleanor herself was terminated from her position at Fairview Hospital, officially for breach of confidentiality, though everyone knew the real reason. But Eleanor Parker wasn't finished. If she couldn't find justice through the courts, she would find it another way. She contacted journalists, medical ethics committees, anyone who would listen to her story. Most doors were closed to her. The hospital board had powerful friends in the media and government. But she eventually found an ally in Dr. James Reynolds, a prominent physician and civil rights advocate. Together, Eleanor and Dr. Reynolds documented dozens of cases of women who had been sterilized without their knowledge or consent. They compiled testimonies, medical records, photographs, evidence that could not be easily dismissed or buried. And they took their findings directly to the public through pamphlets, speaking engagements, and radio interviews. The public reaction was mixed. Some were horrified by what had been done to these women. Others supported the eugenic principles behind the sterilizations. The nation was divided along familiar lines of race, class, and political ideology. Then came the Nuremberg trials. As details emerged about Nazi Germany's eugenic programs that had been partly inspired by American eugenic laws and practices, public opinion began to shift. The connection between American sterilization programs and Nazi atrocities became impossible to ignore. Eleanor Parker testified before a congressional committee investigating medical ethics violations in December 1947. Her testimony was powerful, detailed, and damning. She described not only the Fairview Hospital program, but similar programs she had uncovered at hospitals across the country. "These are not isolated incidents," she told the committee. "This is a systematic attempt to prevent certain groups of Americans from reproducing. It is eugenics in practice, and it is no different from what the Nazis did." The congressional investigation led to reforms in medical consent practices and contributed to the gradual dismantling of eugenic sterilization laws across the country. But it came too late for the thousands of women who had already been sterilized without their knowledge or consent. As for Eleanor Parker, she never worked in a hospital again. No medical institution would hire a whistleblower who had exposed such a dark chapter in American medicine. Instead, she established a small clinic in an immigrant neighborhood in Chicago, providing medical care to the very communities that had been targeted by eugenics programs. Dr. Richard Caldwell continued to practice medicine until his retirement in 1968. He was never held legally accountable for his actions at Fairview Hospital. In fact, he was celebrated in certain circles as a pioneer in reproductive medicine. Upon his death in 1972, his obituary in the medical journal The Lancet praised his contributions to population control. But the story doesn't end there. In 2001, during renovations at what had once been Fairview Hospital, by then converted into luxury apartments, workers discovered something disturbing behind a sealed wall in the basement, a second secret room, one that Eleanor Parker never found. This room contained no surgical equipment, no walls decorated with needles. Instead, it held rows of glass jars, each containing a preserved human uterus. Each jar was meticulously labeled with a name, date, and number corresponding to the Procedure B records. 3,642 jars in total, far more than the 3,000 procedures documented in the records Eleanor had discovered. More disturbing still were the notebooks found alongside the preserved specimens. These detailed not just sterilizations, but experimental procedures performed on unwitting patients. Surgeries that had nothing to do with sterilization and everything to do with advancing Dr. Caldwell's understanding of female reproductive anatomy. Many of these experiments had resulted in the deaths of patients, deaths that had been attributed to complications from routine surgeries. The discovery prompted a new investigation into the Fairview Hospital sterilization program, though by then most of the perpetrators were long dead. The preserved specimens were finally given proper burials in a ceremony attended by descendants of some of the victims. A memorial was erected on the site, bearing the names of every woman identified as a victim of Procedure B. Eleanor Parker did not live to see this vindication of her claims. She had died in 1989, still branded by many as a troublemaker who had fabricated or exaggerated her claims about Fairview Hospital. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this story is what investigators found when they reopened the case files from the original investigation. Among the evidence collected from the secret surgical suite was a small notebook, separate from Dr. Caldwell's main journal. This notebook had apparently been overlooked or deliberately ignored by the original investigators. In it, Caldwell had written extensively about what he called the needle art. He described how each needle removed from a patient during a sterilization procedure absorbed something essential from that woman. Her fertility, yes, but also her life essence. By arranging these needles in specific patterns on the walls of his secret room, he believed he was performing a ritual that would transfer that essence to him, granting him extended life and vitality. Medical investigators dismissed these writings as the ramblings of a disturbed mind. But they couldn't explain one troubling fact. Richard Caldwell had lived to the age of 97 in perfect health until the day he died peacefully in his sleep. He had outlived all of his contemporaries, remaining physically active and mentally sharp decades beyond what should have been possible given the medical knowledge and treatments available in his lifetime. Even more disturbing was what happened to the investigators who handled the preserved specimens from the second hidden room. Of the 7 people who had direct contact with the jars, 6 developed aggressive reproductive cancers within a year of the discovery, regardless of gender. The 7th committed suicide 3 months after the investigation concluded, leaving behind a note that read only, "They're inside me now. I can feel them growing." The building that once housed Fairview Hospital was demolished in 2003. The official reason was structural instability, but rumors persist among former residents about strange sounds emanating from the walls at night, the faint clink of metal against metal, like thousands of needles shifting in unison. The The land remains vacant to this day, with repeated development plans abandoned for reasons that are never fully explained to the public. As for the 17 needles that started it all, the ones nurse Eleanor Parker noticed were missing during that fateful surgery in 1945, they were never found. Not in Dr. Caldwell's secret room, not among his personal effects after his death, not anywhere in the hospital during its demolition. Some say that Caldwell swallowed them before his arrest, incorporating them into his own body as the ultimate expression of his twisted ritual. Others believe that Eleanor Parker took them when she fled the secret room, using them for some purpose of her own that she never revealed to anyone. The truth may never be known. But to this day, women who visit the memorial on the former hospital grounds sometimes report a strange sensation, a sharp, momentary pain in their abdomen, as if being pierced from the inside by something thin and metal. Medical examinations never find anything physical to explain these sensations, but those who experience them universally report the same aftermath. Nightmares of glass jars and walls covered in needles, and the overwhelming fear that something essential has been taken from them that they will never get back. Could the legacy of Fairview Hospital's secret sterilization program somehow continue beyond the physical confines of the building itself? Did Dr. Caldwell's disturbing needle art tap into something beyond our understanding of medical science? And could the thousands of women whose reproductive futures were stolen from them without their knowledge somehow reach across time to warn us about dangers we have yet to fully comprehend? If you've experienced unexplained pain during routine medical procedures, or if you've ever felt that something was taken from you that can't be named or defined, perhaps you're connected to this dark chapter of medical history in ways you don't yet understand. Share your experiences in the comments below. And remember, always count the needles before and after any procedure. You never know what might go missing when you're not paying attention. Like this video if you want to learn more about hidden medical experiments throughout history, and subscribe to the channel for more disturbing true stories that the history books don't teach you. The truth is always watching, even when we look away.